Hi, friends, and welcome to another episode of your Bish Therapist podcast. And today's episode is going to not be about Bravo at all. Today, I'm going to be talking about the Taylor Frankie Paul debacle that's blown up in the news recently. People everywhere are talking about what's going on. There are therapists talking about it, content creators talking about it. And so I'm dedicating my whole episode to talking about it today. Number one, I think it's a really important topic that has a ton of nuance, and there's been a lot of rhetoric online that I feel it's really important to address, number one. And number two, Bravo this week was boring. I'm going to be honest. The Southern Charm reunion was like, wah, wah, Craig doing the same old thing over and over and expecting different results, which is the definition of insanity. Beverly Hills was so boring. Honestly, I couldn't even post about it. I was just like, this is so insane. So for those of you who are not listeners to the podcast normally, but are here to listen to the episode, welcome. I'm glad you're here. My name is Melissa, and I am a real-life therapist turned pop culture aficionado, serving clinical interpretations and hot takes on all things pop culture. Normally, I cover Bravo, but for those of you who followed me since the beginning, which is so many of you, thank you. People are so consistently supportive of me, and I'm just super grateful for that. So thank you all. So in the past, I have covered things outside of Bravo. I did the first or second season of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. I can't remember now. They churn them out so quickly. I've done the Murdaugh murders and some other true crime stuff, Scamanda, Anatomy of Lies, things like that. So really what I try to do is look at things that have a lot of psychological undertones, nuance, things that are just interesting for me. And then I cover that. So traditionally that's Bravo, but Bravo, like I said, has been really disappointing lately. I think that the one thing I'll say before I talk about Taylor Frankie Paul and Mormon Wives is that it reminds me of being more discerning in the reality TV that I'm taking in, because I think what the situation raises concerns of is exploitation on a greater level. And what is it that we are ingesting as lovers of reality TV? And so I'm going to speak to that because, like I said, I think for me, Southern Charm, I'm going to be honest, if Craig is back next season and it's the same old thing, I don't think I'm going to watch it. I think that we have to be mindful about where we put our time, energy, money, resources, whatever. And so if you love Southern Charm, that's great. But for me, it's just getting agitating to watch the same, misogynistic stuff, patriarchal stuff, things with microaggressions and racism. It's just like, I'm so sick of it all. But Summer House is a really good example of doing things differently. Like Summer House, to me, they had a wonderful conversation. Sierra opened up, KJ opened up, Mia opened up about what it is to be Black cast members on an all-white cast. And Sierra was the first Black woman. KJ's the first Black man. The cast listened and they were allies and they supported and they were just quiet and shut the fuck up and let them talk and heard them. And I think Summer House to me is a peak example of how reality TV can be entertaining while being ethical and while being good at heart. I know that's probably rarer. It's probably harder to get, but it's possible. And so Summer House is a great example. So for those of you who have listened, again, since the beginning, I have covered Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, again, season 1 or season 2, I can't remember. The reason why I never continued to cover Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, I'm going to be honest, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, it is they took these young people, right, who are a very vulnerable group of young women who were regular people, and overnight they became celebrities. And the dynamic felt off to me. Like you could see the women's kind of youthful vulnerability, talking about being a Mormon in this patriarchal system and how they navigate that. Like the whole thing about Mormon Wives, which is why I loved it initially, was like, okay, so Mormonism is rooted in patriarchy. But here's how these women are doing that differently. And it started out with a swinging scandal, which is not a scandal anywhere else. It just is, right, if you're Mormon. And I'm going to be honest, part of the contributing factors to, I think, why this is all happening is rooted in that. When people are raised in situations that are telling them, well, you need to be perfect. It's just a disaster waiting to happen. So there's a lot of issues that I had with it. But the major issue was that Taylor and Dakota, their toxicity, I could recognize that there was some very serious problems here, and it made me feel very uncomfortable to keep watching. And then the honest part of this too is just that when my brain is watching something, I need time. And the Mormon wives, they churn these women out. I mean, they just season after season after season, then a quick reunion, and then on to filming another season. It just feels like producers and the people in charge are trying to squeeze the juice out of all of this because it makes them a lot of money. And I feel that we're just watching a lot of the problematic pieces to this. There was news about Kayla that she was 16 when she had her first baby and her husband was 21. And that's kind of jarring, concerning. Michaela has had a lot of chronic health issues and people have attributed that to this relationship, which, to be honest, it's definitely not that simple. Even though there are psychological underpinnings for chronic health issues are rooted in biology. So there's some truth to maybe some concerns that people are having, but then to draw the link that is what is leading to her chronic health issues, we just don't know that. I also saw Layla is on GLP-1s, which is horrifying because that's a misuse of that medication, clearly. And so I feel like we're starting to see all of these really concerning things with the show. Let me just get into it. I'm going to share some details of the controversy. I'm going to share why this is a big deal, kind of what people are talking about. There's a lot of conversations about reactive abuse, about Darvo, about all of these things. And so what I did was I asked my Patreon. So for people who don't know, this is a free podcast, but I also have a Patreon where you can join for free. And people submitted questions. I asked for people's questions about this podcast. And so sometimes I'll do that from time to time. And so a lot of people on Patreon had asked about reactive abuse and Darvo and what does this mean. So thank you to the community, to my Patreon community. I love it. If you're interested, check that out, www.patreon.com/YourBishTherapist. In February 2023, police arrested Taylor for domestic violence. The videos that were taken during that incident resurfaced this week. The other thing is there's so much rhetoric on social media. There's gossip, there's unverified this and that. So what I need to do is follow the through lines of facts because that is all that we have. When a trained assessor, when you're doing assessments, you have to look at and get the puzzle pieces together to make a full picture. And we have to look at the facts of the scenario to do that. And so the fact is that this incident happened in February 2023, but the footage was just leaked. And why was that footage just leaked? People are asking, well, what's going on here with the timing of this? So Taylor Frankie Paul, which I'm just going to be calling her Taylor because it's too much to say over and over. Taylor was going to be on the upcoming season of The Bachelorette. They had already taped. Everything had already been recorded. Taylor was posting videos about some mystery guy and her TikToks or whatever. And then this video came out showing her ferociously attacking her on-again, off-again boyfriend, Dakota Mortensen, in front of her 2-year-old child who was on the couch. With The Bachelorette coming up, and then with this video being leaked, the questions are, well, why now? Who leaked it? And what happened? Those are answers that I don't know. Everyone online is saying, well, Dakota did it to ruin her life. His team put things out saying that they did not do it. TMZ, so the fact is that TMZ got the footage. Where they got it from, no one has said yet, or no one will say. I don't know if they're going to. I have no idea where they got this footage, but clearly Dakota recorded it. And from what I've seen, it looks like the producers for The Bachelorette, they do really good vetting processes, right? It sounds like everyone was aware of this event, but the video took it to another level. And why is that? Okay, so that's the first question is why is this being a controversy now? when you see the police body cam of what happened afterwards, it's concerning. But then when you see the video of what actually happened, it brings it to a whole new level. It paints this picture that we didn't have before that is so jarring and so horrifying. This is why movies and TV are popular, right? Because when we're painting a picture with video and action and sound and all of this, that's going to be much more powerful than just reading an arrest report. And so, by the way, the legal outcome of this incident in 2023 was Taylor pled guilty to 1 count of aggravated assault, which is a 3rd-degree felony, and she received a 36-month plea of abeyance, meaning it could be reduced to a misdemeanor in 2026 if she completes her probation. However, reports indicate recent, separate, and ongoing investigations into new domestic incident allegations involving Taylor and Dakota as of early 2026. So what I'm understanding, if I'm following this through line, is that this video was made public. And while this was in 2023, the concerning thing is that not only that it happened and that Taylor's daughter was injured and involved, it is the fact that new reports are coming up. So we don't know a lot about these incidents yet, but what this tells me is that this toxic relationship continues and is continuing to do the same thing over and over and is extremely problematic. So in my opinion, that is why this is all becoming a big deal now, because it is jarring. And once you realize that it wasn't just a Taylor and Dakota situation, it was that her daughter was hurt at Taylor's own hands. I think that is the part that people are really frustrated, horrified, grief-stricken, concerned about, all of these things. Taylor and Dakota, they share a son, Ever, who turned 2 this week. And Taylor has 2 children with her ex-husband, the one of whom was struck with a chair in the 2023 video. And so what's interesting too is that her 3-year probation was set to end this August. So I would imagine if there are new allegations and new events and incidences, that could affect Taylor's probation. So this could have very serious repercussions for her. So with this whole incident and situation, it is so nuanced and so layered. And what I saw online, a lot of therapists that I respect and like a lot at Therapy Jeff on Instagram, he's really great. Therapy for Women, that's another great account. I was having a hard time putting my finger on getting a lay of the land with this whole situation. There's various layers to this event. So there's the individual layer of Taylor's personal responsibility, accountability, the factors that led her to this incident. Okay. And then there is the systemic piece of things, which is that what I really get angry and frustrated about is the fact that Hulu, Disney, ABC, they're all owned by the same company, which is that for the entire time that Taylor has been on Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, this woman, her relationship toxicity with Dakota, her toxic relationships with her family, and her mental instability was the product. Let me be really clear about that. The product for these people was Taylor Frankie Paul's instability and toxicity in her relationships. That was the product. Okay. So what I don't like here is that these greater systems are happy to sacrifice a woman who clearly needs some help when everyone knew what was going on, exactly what was happening, and they just went ahead with it anyway. So it's like, so her instability and her volatility can be their product until it comes around and makes them look bad, right? So that's just fucked on 100 different levels, if I'm being honest. But then the other context too, there's the relational, which is Dakota's role in this, his role in the relationship, his role with her, the cast, and then family and friends, like people who are witnessing what's going on and who have some sort of responsibility and accountability for getting these people the help that they need instead of exploiting their trauma and their troubles for viewers. So that is one of the really icky parts that I kind of referred to at the beginning of this podcast, which is just that not all reality TV is created equal, but the thing that we love for sure is shrouded in darkness and exploitation. Katie Maloney posted on Threads that essentially she had typed it out and deleted it like 100 times, but just that the things that these companies, production companies, and the people who film these reality TV shows, the things that they ignore or look the other way on are actually really horrifying and really scary. I think Jax and Brittany is another good example of like, we were watching The Valley and we're like, this feels like this should be not happening on television. Like, this is someone who needs to be in treatment. These are people who like need some help and safety and all of that. And so I think that Katie's point is valid. And we're seeing this how, well, your volatility and problems and toxicity are going to be great for the show until it crosses this line. And then all of a sudden you're dead to us, right? So there's just like a lot of complexities there. Taylor's reps and Dakota's reps have responded to this video. And so a representative for Taylor said, "It's sad to see the latest installment of his," meaning Dakota's, "never-ending, desperate, attention-seeking, destructive campaign to harm Taylor without any regard for the consequences for their child." Paul's rep said in a statement, "Releasing an old video which conveniently omits context on their son's birthday is a reprehensible attempt to distract from his own behavior. Thankfully, the public has seen this act before and knows who he is, and sadly, many will recognize this pattern of manipulation both in his actions on the show and from their own experiences." Woof. Okay, so then Dakota's rep said he did not proactively leak news of the domestic violence investigation ahead of Paul's season of The Bachelorette. He claimed his number one priority is protecting their 2-year-old son. Okay, so here's where this takes a turn because unfortunately, all we see in the video is Taylor. I mean, and listen, again, I didn't share the video. I'm not going to give a ton of details because if you want to watch it, it's everywhere to be watched. I didn't think it was responsible to post it because quite frankly, that child did not consent to having this as a part of their digital footprint forever. I don't like that. That's what I don't like about the internet, about this age of social media. I understand why people shared the video. I understand that it's out there. But I think that for me, the number one priority needs to be protecting children, period, end of sentence. But when we see this video, we see Taylor being the aggressor. Like, I don't know Taylor. I don't know Dakota, right? They seem to have an extremely toxic relationship. But what her team is referring to and what a lot of women on the internet is referring to is something called reactive abuse and DARVO. And so what I am going to talk about is what the hell do those things mean? So reactive abuse is a form of self-defense where a victim of ongoing abuse lashes out physically, verbally, or emotionally in response to their abuser's provocations. It is an automatic, high arousal, impulsive reaction to danger. The abuser often uses the outburst to gaslight the victim, claiming the victim is the true aggressor. The key aspects of reactive abuse is context. So it needs to occur within an established, ongoing abusive relationship. The goal is the abuser manipulates the victim into reacting and then uses this to shift blame. And there is a tactic where abusers may record or photograph the reaction to prove that the victim is crazy, unstable, or abusive, reinforcing that control. Okay, so that there is that part of it over here. We don't know enough to know that that's what happened. We would be guessing. We just don't know. Reactive abuse is not the same as initiating abuse. It's a defensive reaction to systemic DARVO. And DARVO is an acronym for deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. So I'll tell you what this means. It is a manipulative strategy used by abusers when held accountable for misconduct. And it was coined by researcher Jennifer Joy Freed, where perpetrators deny the behavior, attack the person confronting them, and flip the roles to appear as the victim. There's 3 steps of DARVO: deny, which is the offender denies that the abuse or wrong behavior occurred, often using gaslighting to make the victim doubt their own memory. The second is attack. The offender attacks the person who confronted them, attacking their credibility, character, or mental stability. And then the reverse victim and offender is where the offender frames themselves as a true victim, claiming they are being unfairly attacked, falsely accused, or targeted. Again, according to Jennifer Joy Fried's research. It is used to avoid consequences and deflect blame. It is used to maintain control and power within a relationship or organization, often used by people who have some problematic personality traits like narcissism, psychopathology, Machiavellianism, things like that. And it's also used to avoid shame and accountability from people who just cannot be accountable for their own behavior. There's a lot of impact of this on the victims, is that victims start to question their own reality. They feel guilty, confused, and research indicates that observers exposed to Darvo often find the victim less believable and the offender more believable. Okay. So this is where you are starting to hear all of this rhetoric online about, well, what did he do and what came before this? And was this reactive abuse? Now that I've explained what reactive abuse is, what Darvo is, I have to give my take on all of this, which is that we can only know what we watched in the video. It is absolutely positively understandable for people to have watched that video and to have concerns about the whole thing. But what I believe as a therapist is that safety is a basic human right. I understand that people want to support women, but saying that men deserve it because of what may have happened before that we don't know about, that is a problem, because the fact is that men are victims of abuse too. I want people to hear me out here, because I think that the mistake that we make as a society, as women, I think too, is that we want to protect women so vociferously that we are willing to tear men down and to try to paint Dakota in a way that we just don't know is true. There have been incidents between the two of them. And so what we know for sure is that Taylor was abusive to Dakota. Her team says that Dakota has been abusive to her. This video only shows her being abusive to Dakota. And it also shows her being in such a frenzied state that she didn't even realize that her daughter was on the couch. And here's the other very interesting thing, is that I was doing a deep dive on this, and there was this old podcast that I watched a clip of on social media where Taylor was talking about this incident. And what she said out of her own mouth was that her and Dakota were at dinner the night that this happened. And she was like crying and very upset because of how badly she's treated Dakota. That's what she said on this podcast. And that she was drinking. And then when they got home, she claims she was blackout drunk. She didn't even know her daughter was on the couch. She said there was a babysitter, and she had assumed, which is wild because I think the child was like 2 at the time, assumed that the child was upstairs. And that confuses me, because it's like, well, I don't get it. When you got home, you didn't notice where your child was, or did you tell the babysitter to leave? Like, I don't understand what's going on with that, but that is wild to me. And she said that in her own words in this interview, that she was blackout drunk, and she doesn't know what happened, and she saw red, and then she doesn't like even remember what she did. But in the video, you can see that she is so frenzied that she is hurling chairs at Dakota. And then you hear her daughter, that sad, oh God, I could cry talking about this, that sad little cry of like pain, because she inadvertently hit her child in this incident of just furiously attacking Dakota. So what I witnessed in that video is someone who was frenzied, someone who is not in control, someone who is not even aware of the fact that her daughter's there. The safety of her, the safety of her daughter, and the safety of Dakota in that moment did not matter to her. it did not, which is concerning. So going back to what I was saying is that men deserve safety. Taylor deserves safety, her child deserves safety, and Dakota deserves safety. And it sounds like, from what I understand, is that no matter what happened before she did those things, she did those things, right? Reactive abuse and DARVO, those are clinical concepts that are very real and are very valid, but they are not applicable in all domestic violence situations. Let me be clear. All families, all dynamics where domestic violence is a factor, they are not the same. Okay. So what starts to happen is I think that women want to be protective of women, but they overstep. And in that, they are making excuses for somebody who needs to be held accountable. Now, here's the other thing that I've heard a lot, which is, well, why should a reality TV star be held more accountable than the president of the United States or than, all these other people in the Epstein files, which is like a super valid point, but also not applicable here, right? People who do terrible things should receive consequences, full stop. People in the Epstein files, people who, now all of a sudden we're aware that people in charge of things are really scary, awful, abusive human beings. That's what I'll say. Okay. And I think that there's a couple of things happening here with women specifically are projecting our painful, bad experiences to Taylor. Okay. So all the parasocial response to this, some of it's very valid. Some of the parasocial response, which is like, we were rooting for Taylor because when you see someone who clearly has a lot of trauma, who clearly has untreated and undiagnosed mental health issues, like, I'm not going to diagnose Taylor because y'all know that's not what I do. It's inappropriate. I don't know Taylor. I'm not her therapist. Any therapist online should not be armchair diagnosing. That is inappropriate. What we're seeing on TV, observational skills tell us is that Taylor and Dakota have been in a toxic relationship since they started a relationship. And Taylor has very serious trauma and mental health issues that from up until this point seems like they have been untreated. Okay. Those are two things that I can say with my observational skills. And Dakota, same thing. Dakota he has a history of substance abuse. He stopped substances and then picked up this unhealthy relationship with Taylor. When we pick a partner, sometimes the reason this stuff happens is we pick someone who matches our wounds. And when we pick someone who matches our wounds, because we have subconscious wounds that we have not dealt with, those wounds kind of come together to be sometimes very explosive or toxic or problematic. Dakota put down substances, but picked up this relationship that to me gives feelings of relationship and love addiction. And so within psychology, there's, sex and love addiction. There's Sex and Love Addiction Anonymous. There's a group for it, which SLAA, I believe, you just Google SLAA if you're interested in that. They have a whole bunch of resources about this sort of stuff. They have meetings, online meetings, things like that. But so, when people get sober, they say for a year, you should not get into a relationship because the reason for that is when we put down substances, we quite often will pick up a process addiction. So process addictions is the same thing kind of as a substance addiction, except without the substance. It's addiction to a process instead of alcohol or drugs or, substances, things like that. And when we don't deal with our stuff, it will come out in all of these other ways. And what I think happened here is that Dakota put down the substance, maybe didn't do the work that he needed to do. And then he picked up Taylor and this relationship became his new, chaotic, toxic. And that's the feeling that it gives to me. When I watch Taylor and Dakota, it gives me that feeling of this is like an addiction to each other. This is chaos. This is toxicity. This is not two people who just can't make it work, but love each other. Like this is, I love you. I hate you. I love you. I hate you. Like this is, they both participate in this problematic toxicity. Both of them do. And they both bring their own trauma to this that fits each other perfectly. And that is where we kind of lie here. But I think what I'm saying is that women want to be supportive of other women, but feminism says that we need to be supportive of all humans. Feminism isn't just about supporting women, it's about supporting men as well. And speaking of that, misandry is a contempt for or an ingrained prejudice against men. Women, we don't want to be hated by men, but we need to be sure not to hate men either, or to automatically say, well, what did you make her do? Because think about this, right? With Craig or with other folks, if the roles were reversed, right? If this was Taylor taking the video and Dakota was the aggressor, no one would be asking, well, what came before this? No one would be asking, what did she make him do, right? Like, so I think I just have to call out the level of, I guess, toxicity and inadvertent misandry happening, which is not acceptable. As I mentioned, Taylor has the right to safety, and so does Dakota, and most importantly, so do those children. And whatever is happening with these two, both of them need to get help and get away from each other because those children are being traumatized. But that's the other piece, is that women and people are projecting their stuff onto Taylor. So there's a whole breadth of responses to this, which is, it ranges from Dakota is the reason for this and it's his fault. And it ranges all the way to Taylor is like a terrible person and should like lose her children. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay. Somewhere in the middle of this lies the truth and the reality. Taylor and Dakota, let me say this, they are not bad people. They are people who have made bad decisions. And the thing with therapists is that most people on the internet don't realize is that in therapy, we have to sit with discomfort. We have to sit with challenging, confusing situations where the person sitting in front of us is not a perfect victim, nor are they a perfect saint or savior. People aren't perfect. And so we have to learn that somewhere in this is these shades of gray is where things really lie. Taylor and Dakota aren't demons that need to be purged from this earth. They're parents. They're human beings that they need help. They need help and they need support. And they need to be held accountable for their continued participation in this toxic and unhealthy relationship. Because whatever came before this, to continue to get back together over and over and over and have this toxicity, it tells me that they are equally participating in this. I'm going to be honest about that. That is equal participation, where they are both coming back to one another over and over and over, doing the same thing and expecting different results. It is the definition of insanity. And there are reasons why I believe that Taylor is kind of like why she may be involved in this situation, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But I just think that we are all responsible for our actions, including the issues that create them. And so, I always say trauma isn't our fault, but it is our responsibility to fix it. Domestic violence isn't our fault, but it is our responsibility to make choices that increase our levels of safety and happiness. And the thing that's hardest for so many survivors of domestic violence is the ways that they inadvertently participated or the ways that they engaged where that line of victim and perpetrator gets really blurred. Because the thing about reactive abuse is it's still abuse. I think that's an important distinction, is that every single situation is different, but abuse is abuse, whether it's reactive or non-reactive or what have you. And so I think that we are all projecting onto her because we want to be validated, right? People who have been in abusive relationships, they didn't get the love, the support, whatever it is that they deserved. And so now they're projecting their stuff onto Taylor. And I guess what I would just urge people to do is to look at your reaction to this, because I think that tells us a lot about what we are experiencing. The parasocial rupture of this is very real. Therapy Jeff talked about this, which is like, we rooted for Taylor. She was imperfect, but people adored her anyway. And now there's such a shift because of the incident that happened with her child, and people are seeing her in such a different light but she was always imperfect. Again, as I mentioned, the toxicity, the instability, that was the product that we were watching. And now all of a sudden, when it goes into an area that we don't like, we're quick to say, well, this isn't okay. But, we all were taking in that product. And so I think that, women have a tendency to misinterpret feminism as a need to overprotect women. We don't need to overprotect her, and we don't need to devalue her. I think what we can do, in my opinion, is to say that they all deserve safety. They all deserve better than what they're getting. Taylor and Dakota have participated in this dynamic. It may not be 50-50. Taylor has talked about being the victim of domestic violence as well. And I believe that. I believe her. I believe that piece of things as well. But whatever's happening here, what's clear is they are both active participants. And therein lies the nuance and the piece of this that it is hard to capture in a post. So let me talk a little bit about some statistics in terms of 24.3% of women and 1 in 7 men, or 13.8%, aged 18 and older in the U.S. have been the victim of severe physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. Regarding children, one study found that children exposed to violence in the home were 15 times more likely to be physically and or sexually assaulted than the national average, which this is why we're all concerned, right? Is because that child has already been so exposed to these things that this may change her life, and not in a good way. And according to the U.S. Advisory Board on Child Abuse and Neglect, domestic violence may be the single major precursor to fatalities from child abuse and neglect in the U.S. Okay. So, remember before, like I talk about with substance use, if you are engaging in substance use, that is the love of your life. You're not being the best partner or parent or whatever, right? The same thing goes for when we have untreated mental health issues and we are in situations that are unhealthy for us. Those things are partly due to steps and the choices that we make. And so that is a really hard pill to swallow. With untreated mental health and the toxicity of this relationship, that child needs intervention. The family needs intervention. These people need help. Period. End of sentence. Regardless of what happened and why it happened and the statistics and all of that, what I can tell you is that these people all need help. Someone needs to intervene. Someone needs to get these two people to work on themselves individually and put their child first, because that's another feature for me of the love addiction and the relationship addiction, is that it didn't matter that her child was there. She didn't even see that her child was there. To me, this gives flavors of addiction, of addictive behavior and addictive processes. And when someone uses a substance, you can see it changes their whole brain chemistry, how they act. And it's like they're not ingesting a substance, but their substance is each other. And it's now infecting their children. And that's a real problem that needs to be changed. But so back to a couple statistics about domestic violence and men, because men are victims of domestic violence too. Approximately 1 in 4 to 1 in 10 men experience domestic violence, with studies indicating about 1 in 4 men, so 28.5% in the U.S., have experienced some form of contact, sexual violence, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime. It's often underreported because of exactly what we're talking about. Men aren't believed, and there's this like toxic belief in our culture that, men can't be victims too, or somehow their mental health doesn't matter, and it does. So the lifetime prevalence, which is wild, is that over 1 in 4 men have experienced rape, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner. And 1 in 7 men have experienced severe physical violence by an intimate partner. So the thing now that I want to share is resources, where to find support. Because I think for me, the whole point of this podcast is that domestic violence, intimate partner violence, untreated mental health issues, substance abuse, this is what I've dedicated my life to researching, learning about, treating, and helping. And part of what goes along with this important discussion is talking about resources and where to find support. Because for the people listening to this podcast, there are tons of people listening to this who have been victims of domestic violence, who have been in situations where their safety has been threatened. And so this is, to me, equal parts educating and supporting people as it is helping people find out how to find the right resources. So where to find the support is the National Domestic Violence Hotline in the U.S. is 1-800-799-SAFE, or you can text START, S-T-A-R-T, to 88788. In the UK, Mankind Initiative, MANKIND Initiative, provides support for male victims, and Women's Law in the US provides resources and information specifically for male victims. And male victimization is actually a significant public health problem, according to estimates in the National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey. With the National Domestic Violence Hotline, it's thehotline.org. That's the website. Again, you can text START to 88788. And the thing is, the National Domestic Violence Hotline has a chat feature and a new AI feature, which I will caution people about. AI is being used a lot in these spaces, and I don't trust that yet. I don't trust it. We need humans when we're engaging about these very serious topics. So I would suggest caution about the AI piece of it, but the chat option is also really great. Then we have the National Center on Domestic Violence, Trauma, and Mental Health at ncdvtmh.org. The CDC has developed the Intimate Partner Violence Prevention Resource and the Sexual Violence Prevention Resource for Action to help communities take advantage of the best available evidence to prevent these types of violence. These resources can be used as tools in efforts to impact individual behaviors as well as family, community, and society factors that influence risk. So that can be found at cdc.gov/intimate partner violence. And then, of course, there is RAINN, RAINN.org, where you can call 800-656-HOPE to be connected to a trained staff member from a sexual assault service provider in your area. Now, let's talk about protective factors. Why is this happening? So there are some individual relationship and community risk factors, and then there's also some protective factors. So essentially what this talks about, so individual risk factors, there's so many, I'm not going to read them all, but low self-esteem, young age, low education or income, alcohol and drug use, depression and mental health issues. Relationship risk factors is relationship conflicts, including jealousy, possessiveness, tension, which is really a huge feature of Dakota and Taylor's relationship. Unhealthy family relationships and interactions. This is like a big one that I wanted to talk about a little bit, which is like people are saying, well, why is this happening? And as I've explained, I think that Taylor's wounds and Dakota's wounds kind of came together to create this really unhealthy situation. But we saw her family and how they treat her. I think that Taylor, I've always said on this podcast, when we don't get the love and support we need from our parents, we don't stop loving our parent, we stop loving ourselves. And we will spend the rest of our life trying to beg people to love us, trying to find people to love us who aren't capable, aren't competent, aren't equipped to do that. And I think that to say, well, what did he make her do? It removes Taylor's sense of autonomy and her role in understanding how she made decisions that don't serve her and ways that she needs to make better decisions to get herself and her children into a safe and healthy situation. The point is that everyone is so different. Everyone's situations are different. And epigenetics says that, why does one person experience this and behave like this and another person doesn't? And epigenetics just says that, we have our genetics that sometimes are kind of turned on or off like a light switch based on a bunch of factors: environment, social environment, family environment, all these other factors. And one of the factors is the community at large, right? So I think that's the other thing we have to talk about here, which is that Mormonism and the community and the culture, how has that created some of this too? Community risk factors are weak community sanctions against intimate partner violence, for example, unwillingness of neighbors to intervene, or societal risk factors being cultural norms that support aggression towards other. Sometimes I feel that Mormonism and what we hear about it, it's like mate for life when you're young, which like our brains are not equipped to make those good choices. Like, for example, sometimes when we have a lot of trauma and a lot of unresolved issues, it takes us time to manage that. And if we've already picked our partner or picked our mate, because we were young and we had a lot of like unconscious wounds, well, that is going to impact the person that we pick. And this is why people are so irritated with the dad talk piece of it, which is like, the patriarchal structure is that these women were the breadwinners for their family. And the men were like, well, we still need to shoehorn ourselves in. And women don't like that. I don't like it either. I don't want dad talk. I have no interest in that. I don't like the men really on the show. I think that sometimes in Mormonism and for the women on the show in particular, it's about the perception. It's about, how women look, how they dance, how they do all these things, how they earn money and take care of their families. But what happens is with women in these situations is a lot of times there's not a prioritization on mental health. And mental health is health, period. We cannot have good physical health, spiritual health without attending to our mental health. And, I said on my last podcast is that it's like cancer. It's like if you don't treat it, it's going to get bad. It's just because it's invisible and doesn't mean that it's just going to miraculously go away. In fact, it will compound and it will get worse. And I think that's what's happened with Taylor is that fame gave her this sense of love and support that she never had with her family. And then sometimes what happens with folks, especially who don't get the love they need from parents, is they don't discern between positive and negative attention. And so sometimes being famous means lots of negative attention. And sometimes I think that Taylor has trouble discerning between the two. She'll take whatever she can get. And again, that's not healthy. So I think the protective factors essentially in this situation, by the way, are strong social support networks, stable positive relationships with others, communities where this sort of thing is taken very seriously. Before I end, on my Patreon, I had a couple of questions, and I want to thank everyone who submitted their questions. Catherine, thank you. You asked about reactive abuse in Darvo, so thank you for that, which I've talked about. Cher asked about why dad talk is so aggravating, and she said, is it because we sense that they are resentful of their wives' success, but still reaping the benefits and riding coattails? I feel like they are trying to be like the Jersey house husbands, but missing the mark, and I kind of just addressed that. So yes, thank you, Cher, for that question. And I do think that is a part of it. It's like asking women to do it all and then being resentful that they are doing it all. And that is really annoying and bothersome to me particularly. So if it's bothersome to you, you're not alone. Jenny said, I don't watch the show, but it was my understanding this was a known issue. Why is it all of a sudden a deal breaker? Thank you for addressing this and let us all learn together. Thank you, Jenny, for that question. And so hopefully I've answered why suddenly it's so wild. Seeing something versus reading it is going to create a different level of understanding in our brain. Again, just like if we read a book versus seeing a movie, it lands differently for a lot of people. So thank you, Jenny, for that. Katie said, I am heartbroken for Taylor's children and hope she gets the help she needs. I am sickened by how Taylor's wounded soul has been exploited by TV networks and the media. I'd love to hear your thoughts about what can be done to hold networks accountable and protect mentally unwell reality cast participants from potential exploitation. So this is a hard one, Katie. It's such a good question. And although I've talked about like the systemic problem with this, I think this is just kind of like the dark side of reality TV. And my only answer to this right now, which I think as a community, maybe we can problem solve together, but my only answer to this is to not watch. If you feel that there's a show that is like, for example, at the top of this episode, I talked about Southern Charm. If I feel like Craig's drinking and his behavior is really problematic and they're continuing to have him on, well, I'm going to choose not to watch anymore. That's what I'm going to do. Now, is it going to make the biggest difference in the world? No. But if enough people don't watch and enough people speak out about it, so I think the two things is like watch or don't. That's what we can do. And also using whatever platform you have, whether it be big or small, to advocate for better content and better treatment of people who are clearly need some assistance. And it seems like some of these women on Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, there's been a lot of really serious things with Jen Affleck and again, Layla and Michaela and all of these things. So I think that we just have to be careful not to exploit people's trauma, but there's going to be plenty of networks who are happy to do that. So we can either choose to watch or not watch. And for me, that's all I can do. And that's how I'm going to use my voice, I guess, in addition to like what I'm doing with the podcast. So thank you, Katie, for that. Kirsten said, knowing you can't diagnose her, what do you think is going on with her? Does she exhibit symptoms of any personality disorder? Is it related to how she was brought up, lack of emotionally mature parents, religious setting, etc.? How does someone like her stop the cycle? So Kirsten, that's a great question. And so to stop the cycle, if we can't stop the cycle ourselves, then what we need is people to intervene and help us stop the cycle. So what needs to happen is people in Taylor's orbit, people in Dakota's orbit, and people Disney, Hulu, ABC. If you exploited her instability for your gain, then you all are responsible for getting this family some help. That's what I have to say. So ABC, Disney, Universal, or Disney, Hulu, whatever it is, blah, blah, blah. Everything is owned by these giant corporations, and corporations are certainly not going to be moral. As I've talked about, I think it is emotionally immature parents not getting the love she needs, the religious setting where it's like, well, we don't talk about sex, but then you're going to have it. And then that just leads to people acting out and not understanding their own bodies or thinking that swinging is like somehow taboo. Like for them it is, but like you can swing and nobody cares. So it's just like, what flavor do we give to the things that we're doing? How do we frame it? That makes a huge difference. But I definitely think that the cycle needs to be stopped by, if they can't do it, someone around them intervening. And Taylor, Dakota, in my opinion, they all need to be off of TV and they need to do some real work and get themselves into a better space and then live their life. I don't think the show, like for me, if the show came back, I will not watch it. I won't, because I think that's exploitative and I don't think that's helpful. So Kirsten, thank you. And then Robin, last one was building on what Kirsten said. I'd like to hear about how, from my understanding, the Mormonism seems to teach emotional awareness, but not real boundaries and maturity. They all have the language, but accept and allow a lot of crappy behavior. They call each other out on things to hold accountability, but are, in her opinion, quick to forgive and move on, but not deal with the impact of actions and the misalignment of words, etc. So I think this is just like a really common thing in that it spans generations, which is people will be quick to say, well, you need to take accountability for this, but then there's not change or changed behavior or something different moving forward. There's a lot of this like rinse and repeat of bad behavior on reality TV because it makes money. So I think that in real life, this dynamic shouldn't happen. To really make relational repair, you have to own our behavior, own our role in it, and then make behavior changes going forward. That's the only real way to do it. But on reality TV, that's very different. That's not entertaining. Like emotional health is not super entertaining, but I argue Summer House shows that it can be. If it were not for Summer House, I would just think like this is impossible to be in the space and to find like ethical TV. But Summer House, it's a great example of it. So listen, I appreciate everyone tuning in for this. I appreciate all the questions from Patreon folks. I hope I answered all the questions. I hope I addressed all the issues. The most important thing to me is that I think that everyone in this situation deserves safety, dignity, and to be in a better situation. And for people who are listening to this, who are in situations that are really challenging or are survivors, I just want people to know that we all deserve love, respect, and support. We all do. All of us do. And whether or not we like Dakota doesn't mean he's any less deserving. Whether or not we like Taylor doesn't mean she's any less deserving. And I sincerely hope that this can be a reckoning of some sort, like the whole reality reckoning thing. This is why that was starting to happen, because it's like these issues don't exist in a vacuum. And, you know, it's just, it's really challenging. And I hope that this has been helpful for people. And, you know, if there's other things that come up, I will continue to talk about this. I may use the situation to change my behaviors. with the shows that I watch and I cover. So all we can do is like with our own behavior, I think that's literally all we can do. So do what's best for you. And thank you all so much for listening. Please check out at Your Bish Therapist on Instagram. Please check out my Patreon, www.patreon.com/YourBishTherapist. And for now, I'm going to send love to you and yours and say ta-ta for now. Disclaimer. Posts are not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide medical advice. Your Bish Therapist is for entertainment and informational purposes only. The podcast, my opinions, and posts are my own and not associated with past or present employers, any organizations, Bravo TV, Greyheart Productions, or any other television network. The information in YBT podcast and on its social media is provided for general informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat. Please do not act or refrain from acting based on anything you read, see, or hear on YBT podcast or associated social media. Communicating with YBT via email and or social media does not form a therapeutic alliance. Melissa, operator of YBT, is unable to provide any therapeutic advice, treatment, or feedback.